Chapter 3. Toad's first meeting with his counsellor. It would take too long to narrate all that happened over the next few days. First Toad was nursed by his friends. Then they encouraged him. Then they told him, quite sternly, to pull himself together. Finally they spelled out the drab and miserable future facing him unless he got a grip on himself, as Badger eloquently put it. But none of this had any effect on Toad. He responded as best he could, but there was no sign of the old Toad, full of life and eager to outwit their well-meant exhortations. Instead he remained sad and depressed, and the more his friends advised him in detail what he should do, the more sad and depressed he became. Finally Badger could stand it no longer. That admirable animal, though long on exhortation, was short on patience. "Now look here, Toad, this can go on no longer. We are all trying to help you, but it seems you won't." Or can't, thought Mole perceptively. "Help yourself. There is only one thing left. You must have counselling." There was a shocked silence. Even Toad sat a little straighter. None of the animals knew fully what counselling meant, but they knew it was a mysterious activity undertaken by people who had experienced some severe or shocking event. The Rat, who was a traditionalist at heart, said, "Do you really think Toad is that bad? I mean, don't you think it's a bit trendy, all this counselling? It seems from the newspapers that everyone these days is given counselling. In my day, people in trouble were given a couple of aspirin. It probably did them more good." Ratty remembered that the original suggestion about counselling had come from him, and he was beginning to get cold feet. "But we've got the address of a local counsellor," said the Mole. "I thought we'd agreed that Toad ought to see him. I agree with Badger." "Well said, Mole," answered Badger. "You mustn't be worried, Ratty. Toad must be in a very poor state of health if even the advice I offer appears to fall on deaf ears. I know you can be obstinate, Toad, but it does seem that you need some kind of help which, surprisingly, your friends cannot give you. Desperate circumstances require desperate remedies. We must try counselling." And so it happened that after much telephoning and arranging and pushing and pleading, Toad arrived at a large house called the Heronry. It was a 4-square, 3-storied building of red brick mellowed to a terracotta colour with occasional bands of yellow. It had an air of permanence and sensible values, and looked the sort of house where a family might remain for a long time. After ringing the bell, Toad was shown to a book-lined room with some chairs and a large desk on which sat odds and ends, including a china head with words written all over the skull. It bore the legend, "Phrenology by L. N. Fowler." The Heron entered, looking tall and wise, and sat on the chair opposite Toad. He wished Toad good morning, and then sat quietly looking at him. Toad, who had become used to people talking at him, waited for the lecture to begin, but nothing happened. In this silence, Toad could feel the blood pulsing in his head, and it seemed as if this were pumping up the tension in the room. He began to feel very uncomfortable. The Heron continued to look at him. Finally Toad could stand it no longer. "Aren't you going to tell me what to do?" he asked it plaintively. "About what?" answered Heron. "Well, tell me what I have to do to get better." "Are you feeling unwell?" "Yes, I am, but surely they've told you all about me." "Who are they?" asked Heron. "Oh, you know, Badger and Rat and all that lot." And with those words Toad started to cry and let loose a flood of unhappiness that, all unknowingly, he had kept pent up for a long time. The Heron remained silent, but pushed a box of paper tissues nearer to him. Eventually Toad's sobs subsided, and he drew breath, and he felt a little better. Then the Heron spoke. "Would you like to tell me why you are here?" "I am here," said Toad, "because they made me come. They said I needed counselling, and they got your name from the newspaper, and I'm ready to listen to you and do whatever you think best. I know that they have my best interests at heart." The counsellor shifted in his chair. "So who is my client, you or them?" Toad did not quite understand. "Look," said the counsellor, "your friends want me to counsel you so that their worry about you will be relieved. You seem to want to be helped in order to please them, so I think that my client is really your friends." Toad was confused by all this, and clearly showed it. "Perhaps we can clarify the situation," said the counsellor. "Who is going to pay for these meetings?" "I might have guessed," thought Toad. "He's just like the rest of them, only anxious about getting paid. "You don't need to worry about that," said Toad, feeling a little like his old self. "Badger said he would take care of the money side of things. You will get paid, never fear." "Thank you," said the counsellor, "but I am afraid that this won't do at all. I suggest we conclude this meeting and put it down to experience." For the first time in many days, Toad began to feel angry. "Look here," he said in a stronger voice, "you can't do that. You call yourself a counsellor. I have come here for counselling. I have sat here waiting for you to tell me something, and now all you can say is that my money isn't good enough. What more do I have to do to get things started?" "That is a very good question, and I will answer it," the counsellor responded. "Counselling is always a voluntary process, both for the counsellor and for the client. That means we can only work together if you want to do this for your own sake, and not just to please your friends. If we agree to work together, we need to make a contract, and then, at the completion of our work, I would send my invoice to you. You see, it's not a question of money, but this can only be your responsibility and no one else's." Toad's mind was racing. Without understanding the full import of the words, he realized that somehow he was being asked to take responsibility for his own counselling, and yet he was not the counsellor. At the same time, the counsellor had used the word work, and this implied Toad's active involvement in whatever might happen. All this was a long way from his initial attitude of waiting for somebody to tell him what to do. These thoughts were disturbing, but at the same time exciting. Maybe there was a way out of his misery which he could discover for himself. After what seemed an age, Toad spoke. "I seem to have made rather an ass of myself, and not for the first time. But I think I'm beginning to see what you're getting at, and I would like to work with you. Can we start again?" "I rather think we have started already," replied the counsellor, and then went on to spell out in detail what it would mean if they agreed to work together on a counselling programme. "We would meet together for an hour once a week for as long as required. I suggest every Tuesday at 10 in the morning, starting next week. At the final session, we will review what we have done and what you have learnt, and you can consider any future plans you may wish to make." "And how much do you charge?" asked the practical Toad. £40 per session," replied Heron. "I will invoice you for that amount at the completion of each session." Then, after a considerable pause, he added, "Well, have you decided what you would like to do?" Toad did not often make considered decisions. Either he made them on the spur of the moment and lived to regret it, like driving off in a motor car which just happened to take his fancy, or else he did what he was told, usually by Badger, and felt miserable as a result. He would have liked to have asked the sensible Rat, "Ratty, what do you think I should do?" and have the responsibility taken from his shoulders. But the Heron was looking at him in a particular way, as if he was quite certain that he, Toad, would make a sensible decision. He finally said, "I would like to work with you and try to discover why I'm feeling so miserable and what I can do to improve things. I've got my diary here. Shall we agree on those dates?" As the counsellor was seeing Toad to the door, Toad turned to him and said, "Do you think there is some hope for me of getting better?" The Heron stopped and looked at him straight in the eye. "Toad, if I did not think that we are all capable of change and improvement, I would not be doing this work. It is not inevitable that things will get better, but what I can promise is that you will have my full and undivided attention, and I shall expect the same commitment from you. If we both work together like that, then we can expect a positive outcome. However, in the last analysis, it all depends on you." Toad walked down the path, trying to understand what those words meant.